Welcome back to Face the Nation. We turn now to the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Connecticut Congressman Jim Himes. He joins us this morning from Greenwich. Good morning to you. I want to jump right into it on the conversation about this Venezuelan gang. You have said some of your fellow Democrats have been too quick to use the term constitutional crisis. But because of the use of the Alien Enemies Act and this gang, you have started to become concerned that's where we are. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that's right, Margaret, and thanks for having me. You know, constitutional crisis is a sort of broadly used term. Lots of people have different definitions for it. It's a lot of stuff you don't like. I'll tell you what I know is a constitutional crisis. If the President of the United States decides to ignore the orders of a court. We have not seen that since Andrew Jackson did that in 1834. When that happens, you have a supine, on its back Congress of the United States, completely beholden to the president, not acting as a check. And if the president says, I don't care what the courts say, which, by the way, he has not said, but which Tom Homan, his czar for deportations, has said, now you have a full-blown constitutional crisis. So I think these next couple of days, as we see how this administration goes after the many judges and the many courts, many of these judges appointed by Republican presidents who are stopping the wild and illegal actions of this administration, we're going to see whether we are in a true, Jacksonian constitutional crisis.
Because of your role on the Intelligence Committee, I know you have some visibility into the assessments of U.S. intelligence. The New York Times reported that the intelligence community said with moderate confidence that the gang, TDA, that we've been talking about, is not directed by the Venezuelan government. However, the National Security Advisor just told us on this program TDA is acting as a proxy of the Venezuelan government. Why does that distinction matter?
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, and I'll come back around to that. But look, what people worry about is that this administration acts with a unbelievable kind of cocktail of incompetence and illegality. When you fire all of the people at the Department of Energy who look after our nuclear weapons and then say, oopsie, we need to hire you back, that's incompetence. I listened to Mike. Mike is a friend of mine. I have respect for Mike, but what he did was dodge your question. I'm not a lawyer, but I can read the first paragraph of the Aliens Enemy Act, which says very clearly that the authority that this administration claims is dependent on a declaration of war, not on acting as a proxy. So Mike distorted the law, and I read the New York Times article too. I haven't seen specific intelligence about whether there's any connection whatsoever between Venezuela and the TDA gang, but you're right. The New York Times, by the way, I'll get an answer on this tomorrow, and I'm going to have some questions for Mike. The New York Times, of course, reported that that the intelligence community believes that there's not a meaningful connection between Venezuela and the TDA gang. So again, it's a bizarre combination of acting incompetently, because maybe there's a Venezuelan hairdresser, a gay Venezuelan hairdresser with no connection to TDA, and if he's in this country illegally, fine, deport him. But to do it in this way under authorities that are not legal is not the way to do this.
You're referring there to some reporting in Time magazine about what happened to some of these, one particular detainee. On Friday, the Justice Department announced a criminal investigation into what they described as the leak of classified intelligence about this group, TDA. The Deputy Attorney General said they won't tolerate politically motivated efforts by the deep state to undercut President Trump's agenda by leaking false information to the New York Times. Do you have any concern, or is there concern within the intelligence community about these leaks?
There's always concerns about leaks, Margaret, and as ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, I don't care who a leak benefits, whether it benefits Joe Biden or Donald Trump or whatever. They are not okay. They are violations of the law. It's very interesting, though, that characterization that you just read, that we will not tolerate leaks that are inconsistent with President Trump's agenda. And this gets at one of my worst fears with respect to the national security apparatus under Donald Trump, everything is about Donald Trump, right? And where I work inside and overseeing the intelligence community, it is absolutely essential that the intelligence community be about one thing and one thing only, which is giving Donald Trump and other national leaders unvarnished, unbiased advice. And if this is all about serving the president's agenda, that is a notion that is completely at odds with what the intelligence community and what we spend $90 billion on, making sure that policymakers, the president chief amongst them, has good information.
I was listening to a town hall that you did this past Thursday in Connecticut, and you were asked who the leader of the Democratic Party is. You threw out some of the sort of known entities, governors out there, but you said, while the party is not leaderless, Hakeem Jeffries is young and untested, and Leader Schumer is not a wartime president. Do you think that your party can afford to stay the course with the existing leadership they have?
Margaret, I think we can do a lot better job with the leadership that we had. What I was acknowledging in that town hall meeting, and I will tell you, I've seen a lot of town hall meetings. I saw Chuck Grassley's town hall meeting. I saw my colleagues from Wyoming's, Ruby Red Wyoming's time in the barrel, and people are outraged. They're outraged mainly, by the way, because they're coming to understand what Medicaid cuts are going to look like for them, what it means to obliterate programs that so much of the country, 70 million people in the case of Medicaid, rely on. So there's an immense amount of anger. What I do know is that it was not a good look for the two congressional Democratic leaders to be on opposite sides of the continuing resolution. That created a great deal of agita out there, and legitimately so. So I am quite certain that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer have learned from this experience and are going to, at a minimum, be unified going forward here.
We will see. Congressman Jim Himes will be watching you in that worldwide threat briefing that'll be happening this coming week. We'll be right back. We turn now to America's healthcare system and former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's also a board member at Pfizer. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Thank you.
So measles is now in 18 states, as I understand it, mostly Texas and New Mexico, but we have seen a growing number of infections, particularly in children. What do parents need to know, and are adults protected?
Adults who've been vaccinated should be protected. This vaccine provides durable immunity, and there's no recommendation that anyone who's already been vaccinated, had the full schedule of 2 doses of vaccine when they were children, would need to get another booster. But if people are concerned, they can check their titers. The only recommendation that CDC makes is people who are taking care of those with measles, perhaps healthcare workers, might consider an additional booster later in life. The bigger challenge is with children. So children get vaccinated, as you know, at 1 year, and then again when they're entering school at around age 4. There's a window where children probably don't have a lot of immunity. So a child born has some immunity passed from their mom up until about 6 months, but there's a window between 6 and 12 months where they're largely unprotected. Typically, we don't vaccinate at 6 months because babies don't have developed immune systems where they can develop a durable immunity from an immunization like this. But there's some recommendations now that children between the ages of 6 and 12 months might get a first dose of vaccine. They would still require a second dose at age 1 and then a third dose at age 4.
I saw the former CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, was talking about that this past week. The current Secretary of HHS, Secretary Kennedy, has said he wants anyone who desires the vaccine, MMR, to be able to get one. But he also describes himself as a, quote, freedom of choice person. I want to get your analysis of what seemed to be a suggested alternative treatment.
They're getting very, very good results. They report from budesonide, which is a steroid. It's a 30-year-old steroid, and clarithromycin, and also cod liver oil, which has high concentrations of vitamin A and vitamin D. And they're seeing what they describe as almost miraculous and instantaneous recovery from that.
Are those viable alternatives?
They're not viable alternatives to vaccination, and I'd much prefer if he made a full-throated recommendation to parents to get kids vaccinated, especially in the setting of the regions where this virus is now spreading. He's talking about steroids and antibiotics. Those would be used in the setting of a child who's developed pneumonitis, is hospitalized, has respiratory distress, and so you might dose them with antibiotics to prevent secondary infections, and the steroids can reduce some of the inflammation in the lungs. The hope is children don't get into that kind of distress situation because they've been vaccinated. As far as vitamin A is concerned, there's really scant evidence that it's effective in this setting. It's used in the setting of malnourished children where it might provide some benefit. But I think talking about those kinds of therapeutics in this context creates a false impression that there's treatments available for measles when in fact there's not. The only way to prevent measles and prevent the sequelae from measles is to get vaccinated. You know, it's the same way people may consider whether or not they choose to get vaccinated for influenza, for the flu. Some people might make a decision not to get vaccinated because they know therapeutics are available. I certainly wouldn't recommend that that they do that. I think everyone should get vaccinated for influenza. But some people might make that choice. There is no choice in this setting. There's nothing effective at mitigating the effects of measles once you get it. So the only way to do that is to get vaccinated.
Yeah, the CDC website describes vitamin A as supportive care, but vaccination the best defense. So thank you for explaining that. There's no CDC director right now. The administration had to pull their nominee, as you know, because they couldn't get enough votes. Alex Tin here at CBS is reporting Florida's Surgeon General and a former Texas Congressman, Michael Burgess, are both being floated for the job. How important is it to get someone confirmed and in the role quickly?
Yeah, I think it's very important, especially when you see what's going on around the country with this measles outbreak in West Texas. We may have more measles cases this year than we've had in 25 years, and so having leadership at the CDC that can direct that response is exceedingly important. Mike Burgess ran the Health Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce, worked closely with the FDA when I was there. He was very good, very effective. He did a lot to advance our interdiction work in male facilities to stop opioids from flowing through those facilities. He was very dedicated to that effort. Actually visited the male facility in New York at JFK Airport to see firsthand the operation before he led a charge in Congress to help provide more funding to get more inspectors into those facilities. So he has a lot of experience in a lot of the areas where CDC has a very relevant mission.
Mm-hmm. And they'll have to face a potential vote once the president makes a selection here. I want to ask about some of the byproducts and some of them deliberate cuts from the president's so-called belt tightening here. There have been impacts at, for example, Johns Hopkins, an institute that does medical research and receives USAID grants. There are also deliberate cuts that have been vowed at Columbia and UPenn, two universities that get federal funding and do health research. Do you have any insight into how many health programs or the significance of the health programs that'll be affected?
Yeah, I don't think anyone has insight into it yet. I think this is still playing out. These impacts are happening across a couple of different domains. There's restrictions on the ability to go forward with new grants because of limitations, for example, posting things in the Federal Register. There's new grant-making policies that are being implemented, so certain entities, certain countries are being added to lists where you can't do research. There were recently some grants canceled that coincided with research that would be done in conjunction with China. They're terminating certain grants on the basis of policy considerations, like whether or not they have a certain DEI component, and however they're defining that. And then you see the institutional-wide cuts. I think that's what happened to Johns Hopkins with respect to the USAID cuts. It's also what happened to Columbia with respect to that $400 million cut, federal cut, that impacted a lot of research. So there's multiple domains where they're being impacted right now. This isn't all DOGE-led. I think we need to be very careful when it comes to research programs where patients are involved. You know, if you make a mistake with a program like a website that you took down, you can always put it back up. But when you cut a grant to a program where patients are involved, where continuity of care is really important to those patients, you need to make accommodation for that or not make those cuts in the first place. I do know I've had some conversations. I think DOGE is aware of that and trying to be mindful of those impacts.
It's an important point to be strategic when it comes to medical care. Dr. Gottlieb, thank you for your insight. We'll be back in a moment. We return now to the Venezuelan deportation case, and for what's next, we're joined by our Justice Department correspondent, Scott MacFarlane, and our immigration reporter, Camilo Montoya-Galvez. It's good to have you both here. Camilo, you did some extraordinary reporting this week and obtained the names of the migrants who were sent to El Salvador. That's information that the administration refused to share with the federal judge, but you got it. What did you learn?
We're still investigating every single case on this list of 238 Venezuelan men who were sent to El Salvador to be in prison there. But this is what we know. We know that according to court filings and also our own findings here at CBS News, some of the people on this list do have criminal histories in the U.S. or abroad in countries like Peru, Chile, and Colombia. But we also know that according to the government, many of these people do not have any criminal record in the U.S. And we have received documents from lawyers and attorneys and also the family members of the deportees who say that these people, some of them, do not have any criminal history in the U.S. But the administration is accusing all of them of being part of this transnational gang known as Tren de Aragua. But how that accusation is being made is at the center of this story. The administration says they have used intelligence and other techniques to identify these people as suspected TDA members, but their relatives and their lawyers say that some of these men were identified as TDA simply because of tattoos.
And that is really where we get to the legal nub of this argument is, can you, as Senator Paul was saying, bypass the right to a day in court on the basis of someone having some tattoos? So, Scott, the Trump administration is going to have this appeal tomorrow, as I understand it. You were in federal court Friday when the judge said it was, quote, awfully frightening how the administration stretched the law. They are looking for this fight.
There's two different fights they're looking for. The legal is one of them. They're going to be in the appeals court tomorrow. They'll go to the Supreme Court potentially eventually, trying to consolidate power to make it an 18th century reality right now where you can expel people who are locked up currently on U.S. soil without having to go through the courts, even though the courts are trying to catch mistakes and make sure nobody's scooped up erroneously.
Even though you could deport them anyhow.
You could still deport them anyhow. That's one fight they're looking to fight. There's also the political one, Margaret. There is so much political upside to all of this for the Trump administration. And you heard that from the National Security Advisor a few moments ago when he told you this is a D.C. distinction, that the administration is not exactly concerned about looking too aggressive in deporting suspected gang members. There's all kinds of wins there. And then there's the other one, Margaret, the villainization of Washington, D.C. federal judges, which can galvanize the conservative base and the Trump base. And you saw that Friday in the courtroom with the judge, James Boasberg, pushing back on the president's allegations that he just wants to set these gang members free. The judge said, they're still locked up. You can deport them the normal way without invoking this 18th century law. Let's see how much more pushback there is from the president to this judge. There was more overnight on Truth Social.
Yes, he's spoken about it. He's posted about this judge raising other concerns. Camilo, though, you actually have reported out what was done behind the scenes to bring this all to a head, to set up this fight. What did you learn?
What I can tell you is that based on conversations with DHS sources, the administration was actively preparing for this operation well before the president actually signed this proclamation, unbeknownst to the public last Friday, before the White House actually published the actual proclamation on Saturday, March 15, and before those planes took office.
As quickly as
That's
possible.
That's right. They stage a roundup across the country of suspected TDA members and transfer those people to a Texas detention center. And by the time the judge held the first emergency hearing on this case, there were already 2 planes in the air and another one ready to take off.
Knowing that they might have to face a fight back in the courts. Scott, the president has issued at least 3 executive orders that we have clocked impacting private law firms who represented clients at odds with President or then Mr. Trump. That's bad for private business. One of those law firms cut a deal, $40 million. What's the impact here?
I talked to one of the lawyers who's been targeted by one of these actions. He says they're trying to take me off the playing field. They're trying to take others off the playing field as we continue to challenge the administration in court. A chilling effect to make it harder to file these lawsuits that have been the firewall so far in the Trump administration. But there's a distinction in the latest round of actions, prohibiting these law firms based in Washington from doing business in government buildings or with government employees. That is a death sentence for a Washington, D.C. law firm. In fact, one of those firms, Perkins Coie, the ones challenging this in court, said as much to the judge. This would kill us. And the judge here in Washington has for now held off on the Trump executive action to strip Perkins Coie. But we'll see how long that protection lasts.
Mm-hmm. And this has knock-on effects for others seeking legal services, but also, as you said, makes them hard to just function.
Especially the stripping of security clearances,
Yes.
Margaret, that makes it harder for a whistleblower at the FBI or the CIA or the Pentagon to find a lawyer to blow the whistle. Makes it possible such whistles will not be blown.
Right, because they need to seek counsel who have ability to deal with classified information. Camilo, the administration announced Friday they're revoking legal status of 500,000 migrants who came here legally from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela during President Biden's terms. This is another fight they wanted to have. But if the stated intention is to go after the worst of the worst and deport them, why focus on people who bothered to be here legally?
Well, the administration would argue that the Biden administration abused its immigration executive authority to create this program without Congress, and that the people who came here under this policy are undercutting American workers, and that they are essentially illegal immigrants as well. And now they are turning them into illegal immigrants by stripping them of their legal status, their work permits, or deportation protections. Right now, they have, for the next 30 days, a chance to self-deport through a smartphone app. If they don't do that, DHS is warning that they will be found, arrested, and deported from the country. And this crackdown on immigration by the administration is also extending to other parts of the immigration system. We also know that the administration is suspending funding, federal funding, for legal services providers and lawyers who help migrant children who have left federal custody or who are still in federal custody and who are facing deportation.
And this is all intentional, that taking funding away even from migrant kids?
This administration does not believe that federal funds should be used for people who are in the country illegally or without legal permission.
Gentlemen, you're going to be busy. Thank you for breaking it all down for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.